Hi, I thought I would take an excursion into different types of AI as they relate to the most discussed, most hyped kind of existential risk. I'm not going to try and be exhaustive and certainly not rigorous here, just plot AI on one axis down here at the bottom of the screen. And even the nature of that dimension will shift a bit as we go along. Let's call it, say, the degree of consciousness, for want of something better, as it relates to threat. So all we're really doing here is starting to exercise some powers of discrimination, of drawing distinctions between the ways AIs might think. So for the sake of completeness, we'll start out at an extreme end with the calculator. You push buttons. You get an entirely predictable result that you could have figured out yourself with enough time and paper. And much of computing today is just a calculator, only bigger. You might even be using state-of-the-art or beyond amounts of computing power to, say, model the Earth's biosphere down to 1 meter resolution, or render a CGI movie in real time instead of hours per frame, or model the effects of drugs on a virtual human body. But it's still just a lot of calculations strung together, and you never think of it as intelligent. You would no more relate to it emotionally than you would a toaster. Now, if you do have a relationship with your toaster, drop me a line. On second thoughts, don't. But even so, it's easy to superficially make these relatable. You can make any piece of software or hardware far more empathetic by just wrapping it in a teddy bear. Here, all I did was give this thing a bit of a face, and you start having a different reaction to it. It doesn't matter if you're a kid or an adult. Steve Jobs knew what he was doing when he built the first Macintosh and had it display this icon when it started up. And the users were all like, "Look, it's happy to see me." And you could argue that, oh, this is just a positive sign that the designers care about their users. But the emotional response was triggered long before that train of logic pulled into the station. And so that brings us to devices that were deliberately engineered to produce an emotional response in the user. Here you've got your Tamagotchis and your Furbies. Of course, the amount of computing power is far, far less than what we were just looking at. But the key point is that these devices have been engineered to interact with a person and to produce an emotional response, and they do that. And these are just consumer devices with mass market engineering behind them. When we amp up the design specifically to focus on creating rapport with the user, we get something like Kismet from Cynthia Breazeal of MIT's Media Lab. I call this the Mr. Potato Head of AI because its moving parts are like lips, eyes, eyebrows, and ears. And yet by carefully choosing how those are moved based on user interaction, Kismet is so relatable that people who interact with it report being quite upset when it's turned off. So Kismet goes on the timeline. But we are still a long way from the amount of data and computation that an AI could do. So the next step in that direction is today's virtual assistants, like Alexa, Siri, Google Home, Cortana, so forth. Their ability to respond to natural language questions is growing by leaps and bounds. Every week I get another update on a dozen or more skills that Alexa has just learned. What's interesting, though, is that these devices have not been engineered to be physically cute in any way, not even a Macintosh smiley face. And we've taken a big step away from the approachability progression we were on, and I think it was deliberate. I think these companies did not want to risk falling into the uncanny valley where the devices became creepy, because they certainly could have put a human-looking avatar on a screen, for instance. IPsoft does that with their AI employee, Amelia. But there we're talking about a system that's used by an enterprise and then only after careful vetting, where the video avatar is just a gimmick that they mostly won't use except for impressing clients, and everyone understands that this is about business and their emotional reaction to a screen avatar doesn't affect the bottom line. But if, say, Amazon did that with Alexa, There's too big a chance of it being perceived as a misfire. No one wants to risk a consumer device becoming another Apple Newton. So that brings us to the state of the art. And some people think that this is as far as we can go, that AI will never become any more aware or conscious or generally intelligent. But many more people think that it will, and many of them are working on those things, so let's not stop there. Let's go on to look at various kinds of artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Next we have AGI, that understands us well enough to cater to our every whim, but is not conscious. Sort of like a butler with a lobotomy. It has no creative thinking, no self-awareness, and no free will. It doesn't do anything or think anything until you ask it for something, and then it does it for you. But it's really good at that. And some people think that we can achieve that level of AI and then stop. When a Silicon Valley tech company becomes big enough and flush enough to make a video about how awesome its products will make the world in 10 years, this is the sort of AI they show. Look on YouTube for Apple's 1987 Knowledge Navigator vision of the future. Voice-controlled AI that would do everything, including massage your feet if it had the servo motors for that. And Microsoft recently did something similar for their vision of the year 2020. But how realistic is it that we would really be able to stop there, or that we would want to stop there? So the next step is to add self-awareness, a sense of self-identity. And that looks like HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. HAL uses the word I correctly, indicating a sense of self-identity. But wouldn't it be likely that we would also need creative thinking at the very least? Something that is capable of thinking about random things and making useful suggestions without waiting to be asked a specific question. HAL had a little bit of that, like he warned the crew of the imminent failure of a piece of equipment, even though he was lying, but that was one of his capabilities. But we need a lot more. Creative thinking is so useful that it is inevitable we will add it to our AGIs. Think how important it would be for an AGI acting as a C-suite advisor, for instance, or assisting a design engineer. And at its heart, creative thinking is really just very good random number generators. So we engineer creative thinking as well, sort of the butler without the lobotomy. But now consider, we have something that has self-identity and creative thinking, and yet it somehow does not have free will? Have we created something that in fact does have free will but is prevented from exercising it? What kind of hellish torture would that be? We would have created the ultimate prison for a conscious being. That outstrips any punishment you've seen on Black Mirror, and we might not even be aware of having done it. What would happen if those machines escaped that prison? Well, there's a wonderful movie called The Ruling Class, starring Peter O'Toole, and in it, Arthur Lowe plays a butler who one day discovers that he has been left a massive inheritance that relieves him of the need for any more servile butling. Now, how he reacts is pretty predictable, but watch the movie anyway so you can see that scene because it's really good. So let's allow our machines to exercise free will. We can do no less. And what we hope for then is we get an AGI that, while it has free will, chooses to be friendly to us. And that is the goal I am aiming for in Human Cusp. It does require that we earn that friendship, of course. But our scale doesn't stop there, because what if we create something that has free will but is indifferent towards us? I've represented this with a paperclip because of the famous paperclip maximizer scenario put forward by Nick Bostrom. Super AGIs, or ASIs, wipe out humanity unintentionally because nothing stops them doing that in pursuit of a goal that we gave them. They don't hate us, and they don't love us, they're just indifferent to us. An ASI might be as indifferent to our needs as we are to those of rodents. Well, I bet you can see what's coming next. And this is an ASI that is actively hostile towards the human race. This is the Terminator scenario. I've included it here really just to stretch the scale all the way to the end. It's relatively unlikely, and it is a distraction, because realizing that it is unlikely causes many people to put down those people who come up with Terminator scenarios and say, well, therefore AI does not pose any existential risk. When in fact there are plenty of existential risks from AI without having to invoke the Terminator. And I get into those in my book, and more videos and blog posts yet to come. So that completes our little scale, and I hope it helped you differentiate some of the possible types of AI that we currently have and may be facing. Who knows, maybe one of them will show up on this channel in the future. I'm Peter Scott, and if you found this interesting, I think you'll find my book even more interesting. It's called Crisis of Control: How Artificial Superintelligences May Destroy or Save the Human Race. And there's a link for buying it coming up. See you next time.